You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, this is Brandon Duham, and this is Locked On Wild.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome into our first edition of Locked On Wild Live, coming to you after a late night win for the Wild last night against the Seattle Kraken. And so we are going to take your comments here today. Denny already here and ready to rock with us. And as people funnel in, kind of want to just get a sense to start of what everybody wants to see from these live episodes. So we'll start as people kind of funnel in. We'll start with just a few things that I can actually take some notes on about what everybody would like for these going forward. I just got to find a pen, of course. So if anybody has, Denny and Tracy are here right now. If anybody has anything that you would like going forward, I think probably the number one thing would be guests to hop in here to be panelists on these live shows. So I'm going to write guests down first. And as we get rolling, feel free to just shoot things in the comments. No, sorry, Tracy. NASCAR Dad has been banned from the channel. Turns out if you rip the host, you're not going to be around for long, but it's all right. Wild won last night. We're feeling good here ahead of Tuesday's game against the Carolina Hurricanes. So let's start. Aaron brings up a good question to start, and I'm just going to jump into this one, and we will discuss it. And as more questions come in, feel free to shoot them in the comments, and we'll get to them as we go. Is there anyone on the Iowa Wild roster that would be able to take Freddie Gaudreau's spot? Aaron, yes, there are actually a couple of players that I think would be able to take that spot, but we've not only got that, we've got a little bit of a log jam on the NHL roster too, because Mason Shaw is up with the NHL team, has not played yet since he was recalled by the Minnesota Wild. And so I think at this point, he probably gets the first chance to take that spot in the lineup. You've also got Adam Beckman down in Iowa. You've got Sammy Walker down in Iowa as well. But I think if you're going to replace that spot in the lineup, the first spot that you go is Mason Shaw. He, I think, gets the first crack to see if he can add a little more than Gaudreau is at this point. And we've talked at length about the fact that it just kind of feels like Freddie Gaudreau is without a chair. Like in this game of musical chairs that's been going on throughout the season, it feels like Gaudreau is a guy without a chair at this point. You've also got Marat Kuznetsov, who will be we've got Marat Kuznetsov, who is another name that likely will be heading to the NHL this season. Very possibly his last game of his KHL season is today. So there are, I would say, the two guys that are most likely are Shaw and Kuznetsov. You'll forgive me if my brain is firing slowly to start. Was up till about 3:00 this morning. It's always hard to unwind after a late game. That's just how my brain is wired. But Denny would like to talk about the improvement of this Wild team. It's it has been noticeable for the Wild since the All-Star break. If we look at the stats for this Minnesota Wild team, since the All-Star break, since play resumed for them on February 7th, the Wilds are, that's not what I wanted. Let's go to the teams. The Wild are 6-1-1 since the All-Star break. 7-1-1 now since the All-Star break in 9 games. They are averaging 4.11 goals per game, giving up 3 goals per game on average. They've scored 37. They've given up 27. They are at 30% on the power play. Their penalty kill is at 78.8%, which is a marked improvement over where it's been over most of the season. And what are some of the big things that have led to the Wild being able to go on this run, go on this 7-1-1 in their last 9-game stretch? Number one is the formation of what is quickly becoming one of the hottest scoring lines in the entire NHL, Kirill Kaprizov, Matt Boldy, and Joel Eriksson-Ek. That has been getting that line that is capable of wrecking games and just destroying teams by themselves has helped with the inconsistencies throughout the rest of the lineup. So that number one line going on an absolute heater has been a huge reason as to why the Wilds currently sit third. Since the All-Star break, the Wild are third in points with 15. You're getting elite level scoring from those guys. I think one of the biggest things is that we've seen the power play start to really key in and be able to take games over. 30% is very, very, very good. And so the Wild getting power play scoring to kind of benefiting from those opportunities that they get when teams send them to the power play, being able to capitalize on those is huge. Penalty kill being better as well. That's another big reason. So special teams improvements is a big reason as to why we're 7-1-1 in the last 9. And the goaltending's still up and down, but you've got to give credit to Philip Gustafsson and Marc-Andre Fleury for what they've done in their most recent starts. Gustafsson with the 40-plus saves against the Oilers. And Fleury had, especially on the penalty kill, Fleury had some very key saves in these last 2 games. And so those are, I think, some of the big reasons as to why this team has made the improvements that they have. The big thing, I think, too, is that the defense has eliminated some of those mistakes that were leading to goals that were just too daunting to be able to overcome early on in the season. The defense has done a better job of just simply doing their jobs. And Declan Chism's a big part of that. As we talked about in last night's postcast, I think, has played really well, especially in an elevated role with Jonas Brodin. The D-corps has not had any major issues over this stretch too. And so everybody has just, all those areas have just elevated a little bit to be able to put this team on a lengthy stretch of wins over these last 9 games. We'll go to Matt, and then we'll kind of circle back as I continue to recap some of those things. Are we seeing anyone we might want to target before the deadline to firm up this D with Spurgeon out for the season? See, this is an interesting question too, because it feels like in order for the Wilds to add defensively, they're going to have to move somebody off the roster currently, whether that be John Merrill or Alex Goligoski or Dakota Mermis. If they're going to add somebody to this blue line, one of those guys would have to be moved. And it's not a money thing. The Wild have I think it's $5.3 million of cap space for the rest of the season, with Jared Spurgeon being done for the year. So they have the money. The cap space is there. It's just a roster issue at this point. The Wild can expand their roster after the trade deadline, but until then, they can only have the maximum of 23 guys. And so if they're going to add another defenseman to a group that is already carrying 8, it feels like somebody is going to have to go in that mix. And I know we've talked a lot this year about the need to upgrade from Alex Goligoski and John Merrill. They're still here. And so it's clear that the coaching staff on the Goligoski side, it's easy to understand because he has said that he doesn't want to waive his trade protection. And so that's one that, you're going to finish out the string with Goligoski, and then he's a free agent at the end of the season, likely retires. So that one is easier to just see the ending there. And so I think Goligoski ends up as a back end kind of a depth guy the rest of the season, fill in a pinch, which I think at this point is probably the role that he is better suited for, as opposed to being a guy that plays on a nightly basis. Now on the John Merrill side, Merrill had some good moments against the Kraken last night and, was mixing it up with guys at the end of the game, stepping up into the play offensively. And it's going to be a situation where the next time there is some sort of a heinous breakdown, we're going to be calling for whoever to step in. But I think at this point, the key piece on the defense is you've got Faber, you've got Middleton, you've got Brodin. Bogosian, when he comes back, will be slotted in as one of those key 4 guys. But I think we have seen enough from Declan Chism that he is one of those third pairing defensemen for the rest of the season at the very least. And it may be too with how Chism and Brodin have played, that maybe you just put Bogosian on the third pairing and have him play there. But either way, I think now there is only one spot in which this team is going to be rotating players in. And as long as Mermis plays well, he is certainly a candidate for that spot. And unless Bill Guerin has something in the works that is just so far off the radar that nobody is considering it, it feels like at this point, in order for them to add, somebody has to come off the roster. So if he's willing to do that, then all bets are off as to what this team does at the trade deadline. And we said it all along. We've said it pretty much all season on this show, is the stretch right in front of the trade deadline is indicative of where this team is going and what they do at the deadline. And I know we've seen examples of inconsistency all season, lulls, head-scratching games. The key point at this point is that the Wild are 2 points out of a playoff spot right now, and so they are very much in the push. Very much in the push with the likes of Calgary, Seattle, Nashville, St. Louis. Arizona's officially out. Probably a good thing for them. But they're 2 points out of a playoff spot at this point. And so they are very much in the thick of things. But as Lou Nanne mentioned with Dan Barrero last week, because you are currently sitting with fewer wins than those teams in front of you, that means you can't tie them. You have to get more points than them in order to get ahead of them, because that first tiebreaker is, I believe, regulation wins. And so if you finish below those teams with regulation wins, but tied with them for points, then the tiebreaker goes to whoever you tie with. So you have to, you've got to find ways to steal some points here down the stretch. And as Denny notes, gonna have to probably go about 17-7 to make the playoffs here over these final 24 games. And let's just look at that stretch to start it off. You got Carolina on Tuesday. The Wilds just went to the Hurricanes a couple of weeks ago and beat them on the road 5-2. But that's a very tough Calgary or Carolina team. So that'll be a tough game at home. But the Wild did just beat them a couple of weeks ago. Then you have arguably the two most important remaining games before the trade deadline. At Nashville on Thursday, and then at St. Louis on Saturday. Two teams in front of you in the standings, and two teams in the Central Division. And this has been a trend all season that, with the Wild playing better, potential for it to be untrended here in these two games. But you play Nashville on the road, you play St. Louis on the road in two consecutive games. Those are going to be real tests for this team. Then you have San Jose at home on Sunday. Sharks are not great. Arizona on the road, Colorado on the road on Thursday and Friday, the 7th and the 8th. Then you host Nashville on Sunday the 10th. You host Arizona on March 12th, Anaheim on March 14th, then at St. Louis on the 16th, at Anaheim on the 19th, at Los Angeles on the 20th, home against St. Louis on the 23rd, home against San Jose on the 28th, home against Vegas on the 30th, home against Ottawa on the 2nd, home against Colorado on the 4th, home against Winnipeg on the 6th, at Chicago on the 7th, at Colorado on the 9th, at Vegas on the 12th, at San Jose on the 13th, at Los Angeles on the 15th, and final game of the season is home against the Seattle Kraken on Thursday, April 18th. What do you have in this stretch? You've got games coming up against the teams that you're chasing. You play Nashville a couple of times. You play St. Louis 3 times in this stretch. And so you have the opportunity to pick up key points against the teams that you are chasing in this playoff push. So it's all right in front of this Minnesota Wild team. For all the things that have gone haywire throughout the early part of the season, for Dean Evison getting fired, for starting the season 5-14, the Wild are right in the thick of it. And so it's just a matter of handling your business, because my personal preference, I am not a fan at all of teams having to rely on others to help them out. You are just so much better off handling your own business, as opposed to saying, well, even though we lost, we still get in if this happened. You see that in the NFL all the time, where it's like, if there's a team that needs to get into the final week of the season, you got to have 9 other teams lose, 2 teams tie, and heavy underdogs win. Like, just handle your business, and you stand at this point a good shot to be able to get in. Amanda with a good one here. What is a good power play percentage? You just said it was 30%. Not sure where that falls in standard practice. So let's just look at, for the season, let's just look at the power play percentages for various teams. The Tampa Bay Lightning currently lead the NHL with a 29.8% power play. I feel that is upper echelon level. I feel if you can be above 20%, if you can be in the 21, 22% range, the Wild are 22.6 right now and stand 13th in the NHL. If you can be, to be a top 10, you'd have to be at 22.8. And for the Wild to get to top 10 on the power play, that's a 0.2% increase over where they currently are at. So I would say right around 22% is good for an NHL team this year. 25 and above is great. There are 6 teams that are above 25% on the power play this year. The Rangers, the Panthers, the Hurricanes, the Oilers, the Maple Leafs, and the Lightning. Those are all great power plays. So I feel like if you can get above 20%, you're a good power play. If you can get above 25, you're a great power play. So the Wild with an extended 30% run on the power play. And if we go back even a little further, I think the Wild have been let's just go to the start of 2024. The Minnesota Wilds have since the calendar flipped to 2024, the Minnesota Wild are at 27.9% on the power play, which is 7th in the NHL. And we're talking now basically 2 full calendar months. So this power play, and credit to the players for taking more of a let's attack approach. That game against Vancouver against Casey DeSmith, where they just basically attacked the same spot on the net. You get Joel Eriksson to the slot right in front of the goalie. And you've got Kaprizov behind the net, Zuccarello off to the side, Boldy off to the side. And they just run that little triangle to a real high level and are able to get it to Eriksson, and he just unleashes those one-timers. But then you've got Kaprizov, who was able to tuck one in past Joey Decord last night. So it's a variety of goals, and I think it's just more of a shoot mentality. Now, there are still some times where the power play is a little on the tentative side, passes a little too much. There are even some times where the Wild struggle to gain the offensive zone. But that comes with the territory. You're not going to be successful on 100% of your power plays throughout the course of a regular season. If you're operating between 20 and 30%, you're doing pretty good. So hopefully that answers that question, Amanda. Looking at some of the other questions, let's talk a little bit about Murat Kuznetsov. Nom0612. How long do you think till Murat Kuznetsov is here now that his season is over in the KHL? And this goes beyond the on ice side of things. Obviously, he's got to sign his entry-level contract with the Minnesota Wild. That's first and foremost. If the Wild then decide to burn a year of that deal to get him here, that expedites the process. But then you have to do all of those procedural things, work visa, however all of that stuff works. And so it's more so about the off ice stuff that I think would present taking the longest. But honestly, if he agrees to the deal and the Wild burn a year of that eligibility to get him here right away, we're going to see him in as quick of a fashion as they can make it. So I kind of wonder, just me talking out loud here, hear me out on this. I kind of wonder if we see him shortly after the trade deadline, because the Wild then, after the trade deadline, as long as they're cap compliant, can expand their roster past 23. So that might be a likely target for Kuznetsov. I know that's 2 weeks away. So if they get everything signed and he wants to get here and the Wild want to get him here, I would welcome it before that. But I just, like, there's a lot of that other stuff that goes into it that does not involve the on-ice product that has to be taken into consideration too. So I hope it's sooner than later. I have a feeling that that it will be. And look, if you burn a year of an entry-level contract like the Wild did with Brock Faber last year, you're going to see him play. Like, he's not just going to sit on the bench. You're going to see him get opportunities to play. Because if you were just going to bring him up and sit him on the bench, that is foolish to burn a year of an entry-level contract just to get a guy here and not play him. So Kuznetsov will play, which is also why I kind of wonder about the trade deadline, because then that gives you an opportunity to clean up some of that bottom six clutter. Maybe a Duhaime or a Dewar trade to free up some spots, brings some prospects or something back to just free up some spots, and we go from there. Do we have any ideas on return dates from Foligno and Bogosian? Dan answers this wonderfully. Foligno's on IR till Thursday. Bogosian is expected back against the Hurricanes. Wonderful. Very happy for that. But, you know, then that's going to create a, well, who comes out of the lineup situation. So I'm going to be interested to see how these things play out. Let's go to I think we need to see Middleton take more fights. Nobody should mess with a dude rocking that walrus of a mustache. Jake Middleton is one of the great, really underappreciated personalities on this team. Like, these guys are not robots. And so the fact that you've got a guy in Middleton who just really, it feels like he should be doing Old Spice commercials as like his second gig. And he just happens to be a hockey player too. Like, he really just, I think, is a fun part of this mix, and really an unsung acquisition by Bill Guerin. Like, we talk about all the different trades that have impacted this team currently. Folks, Kaapo Kähkönen is backup at best in San Jose. And I know San Jose is a garbage team, so you're getting zero help in front of you. But Kaapo is a young enough goalie that if the Sharks would have seen something that they could build around, that you don't trade for another goalie to come in. You do so because you don't think Kaapo is the right guy. So he's a backup for the Sharks, and all of a sudden is like a 27-year-old goalie who is going to be, I believe, hitting the open market in this offseason. Tough to see him doing anything more than a backup at this point. And that would be a rough spot for Kaapo to be. As Dan lays out for us perfectly, games remaining against these opponents: Nashville 2, Arizona 2, St. Louis 3, San Jose 2, Anaheim 2, Chicago and Winnipeg 1. That could be 12 of those 17 wins right in that stretch. The Wild have, by metrics, one of, if not the easiest remaining schedule in the league. The problem, though, with that is there was somebody commented on YouTube last night. Let me see if I can just find it here so that I can give that. 8th H Sun 17. The Wild have the number one easiest remaining schedule based on the teams they are playing with a winning percentage of .512. The other 4 teams they are battling for that slot, Nashville with a .527 remaining winning percentage. Seattle, Calgary, and St. Louis have a .539 remaining winning percentage. So they're in the top 10 in terms of easiest remaining schedule, which is why getting to this point was important. Getting to this point to where you're 2 points out and are now just going to be, you're going to be battling with these teams the rest of the way. And there will be some nights where it looks like you're down for the count. You're out of the mix. There will be some nights, if the Wilds continue to play the way they have, where they hop into that second wild card spot. And so the key here is the key down this stretch, and this is something that's, this is something that I struggle with a lot, is to just not, unless you have like a catastrophic injury or something, just to not get too discouraged after a loss or too high after a win. Like, this stretch is going to be a grind, and with the way that this team is played and the opponents that are on the schedule, they're going to be in it until the end. So it's 17 wins is attainable for this group. They just have to, you have to avoid the slow starts for one. And you just need, and they talked about this on the broadcast last night. You don't need like Vezina caliber, like last year's team where they struggled so much to score in 5-on-5 especially. You don't need Vezina caliber goaltending. You just need to start eliminating some of those soft goals. If that's a goal for Marc-Andre Fleury and Philip Gustafsson the rest of the season, is to just try to fine-tune and eliminate some of those soft goals that have been scored by opponents, like the ones that leak through the 5-hole where you close your pads and you think that you've got it pinned, but then it leaks through for a goal. Some of those types of things. Philip Gustafsson gets buzzed up top. If he can close some of those holes against opponents, that's what will help this goaltending be more consistent down this stretch run. Like, look at what we've seen the last 2 nights. Philip Gustafsson was great against the Oilers. He faced a ton of shots, especially down the stretch in the third period. And Marc-Andre Fleury last night, in particular, on the penalty kill. And it was a weird game last night because the Wilds just like completely took that thing over in the second period. But I still felt like Seattle had plenty of opportunities, and Fleury was able to turn them away. So you've gotten good goaltending performances here, especially on the road, and especially on the back-to-back. And that's the other thing too that I keep having to remind myself about this stretch. Is that it was a back-to-back, and there was no instance in which the Minnesota Wild looked like they were playing on a back-to-back in last night's game. Yeah, Seattle had a couple of instances in which they really pushed, but if you would have told me that the Wild played a back-to-back, I would not have been able to tell. So that is a key piece too. That comes with that urgency of kind of sensing where you're at, and that the fact that, hey, it's it's time to really tighten up and to take these games seriously. And they did in both games. We are looking at a Vancouver first round matchup. Yeah, honestly, it's looking like it at this point. And Vancouver is incredibly talented. They're a great team. The Wild have seen Casey DeSmith, I think, in every game except for the one here, which was a 2-1 shutout. And that was the game that Thatcher Demko played. And it was a 2-1 win for the Wild in a shootout. They get great goaltending. They have high-end talent. Actually, I might be crazy here. Has Casey DeSmith started all 3 games against the Minnesota Wild this season? 1, 2, 3. Yes, he has. So the Wild have not seen Thatcher Demko yet, and likely wouldn't until the postseason. But this is the thing about, and this is why I think people are not optimistic in the sense of the playoffs, is because it's one thing to win these games in the regular season when you're facing a backup goalie. A key player for an opponent can have just a hideously off night. Team collectively can have an off night. The thing that has people guarded is the fact that when you get to the postseason, it's the same opponent for a 7-game series. And so that opponent is going to dive into every single thing that could be viewed as a weakness for your team. And they're going to try to exploit it to death. They are going to try to hit those weaknesses repeatedly. You also see things tighten up in the postseason, and you're not going up against you're not playing a team that has like a 14% power play. All the teams that get into the postseason usually have really, really good special teams. And if you are so, like, look at the last 2 seasons. Penalty kill got exposed in both of them. But also the Wild went to the box a ton. So it's one thing if you don't have a great penalty kill, but can limit the number of times that it is out there, it is featured. But the Wild's in the series against Dallas and the series against St. Louis, it was just a parade to the penalty box, which led to both of those teams being able to take advantage. So that's why people are skeptical. That's why people are guarded against making it to the postseason. And so you have from now to the end of the regular season to try to tighten those things up. That's what this next stretch is about. If you're pushing for the postseason, so it's all about get yourself ready and put yourself in as good of a position as you can. Special teams goal is at least 105% combined. So I'm glad Dan brought this up because this is something that is an easy metric to kind of track. Special teams combined percentage, both penalty kill and power play, is at least 105%. And on the penalty kill side, that's where you really want to see the Wilds make some market improvements. The Wilds are currently 21st in the NHL in penalty kill since the calendar flipped to January. They're at 77.3% on the PK. If you even narrow that down to what they have done here since the All-Star break, the Wild are 17th. They are at 78.8%. So we're seeing improvement there. And if you keep that going, then you kind of get into that sweet spot that you're looking for. Teams that meet that 105% percent plus mark this season for power play and penalty kill include the Tampa Bay Lightning, Toronto, Edmonton, Carolina, Florida, Detroit, and the Los Angeles Kings. The Wild have points this year against all but the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Los Angeles Kings, though they have 2 more against the Kings. And the Los Angeles Kings were world beaters at the time that the Wild played them early on in the season. They have been anything but since. And the Wild were a mess at that early part of the season. So it could be very likely that the Wild are able to pick up at least one of those games against the Kings to grab points there. But Tampa Bay Lightning, man, it just, even though that team is incredibly mid this year, they're in a wild card spot right now, but by their standards over the last handful of seasons, they're very average compared to where they've been. All they do is they get you to the penalty box and then they just go nuts on the power play. That's just how they roll this year. And so those games against the Lightning, those were frustrating. But we wouldn't have to match up against Tampa Bay until potentially the Stanley Cup final. So I guess that is that's a bright side about where things are at right now. I better confirm that because knowing me, they play the no, they don't. I can finally fit the entirety of the remaining schedule on one page without having to scroll up on ESPN. We've gotten to that point of the year, folks. But yeah, no more matchups against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And yeah. Oh, let's go to this. For those that that didn't hear it last night, Joel Eriksson-Ek is going to be fine. John Hines, after the game, said that he didn't see anything that would warrant concern for Eriksson-Ek. It was just at that point in the game, I think, that the Wilds decided to play it on the cautionary side. You're leading 5-2 even at that point, 5-1. No need to try to rush him in, but just an awkward hit into the boards. But with what we've seen from John Hines, that he really doesn't ever divulge medical information. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but really doesn't ever have a timetable or an update on any players. The fact that he immediately, and you could tell he was ready for the question too after the game. The fact that he immediately said, "No, I don't see anything that warrants any concern with Eriksson-Ek." It's a huge sigh of relief because Joel Eriksson-Ek is in the category of one of the players that you absolutely could not afford to lose this season. Like, you just can't, because of the things that he does and all the different areas that he impacts. Power play, penalty kill, number one center, one of your top defensive forwards. That's a lot to try to fill in terms of a void in the lineup. And so the fact that he is not going to miss any time is a relief. What do you think the odds are that Vladislav Firstov comes over when the rest of the Russian prospects do? I'm just going to pull up his info because I haven't heard a lot of steam on Firstov. And it's not to say he's not, it's not to say he's not having a good season. He, in fact, is having a really good season. 17 goals, 18 assists, 35 points for the Nizhny Novgorod Torpedo in the KHL. 17 goals in 66 games is pretty darn good. And he is 22 at this point. So it's certainly possible that we see him within that same vein as the Danila Yurovs, the Liam Ugrins. I would imagine, though, that all of the players of the guys that are likely to just head right up to the NHL level, I would imagine first off may get a stint in Iowa first. Just and I'll do some digging there because I'm just going off of kind of the fact that we haven't heard a ton of steam on him, but I would imagine he will get, I should say, another stint with the Iowa Wild because he actually was with Iowa last year for a cup of tea and the year before that for 8 games as well. So I would imagine he'll go back to Iowa before he heads up to the NHL level. But I will add that. I'll add that to the list. Let's put a big old win counter thing on here. Should I get like a bell? Should I get like a dinger every time the Wild get a win in this stretch of the likely 17 that they need? I'll do something. We'll do something for that. We'll have a little fun with it. What is this show if we can't have a little fun while we are while we're at it? Let's get caught up with comments here. Great point by Denny. The Wild need to figure out the third line. Hopefully they will give Rossi some help. And yeah, it is a situation here where we saw Johansson with Rossi and Zuccarello for a long time, for a good stretch of games. And it just didn't seem to. In fact, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to just look a little deeper, courtesy of my wonderful friends at moneypuck.com. Maybe this will work. Maybe it won't. I just want to look at a little bit deeper at the analytic numbers for that Zuccarello, Rossi, and Johansson combination. I mean, if it'll let me, it certainly is not. Oh, here we go. Okay. Offensive lines only. What is going on here? There must be a million other people on this website right now because it is slow. Okay. Oh, offensive pairs only, please. And let's go specifically the Minnesota Wild. All right. The combination of okay, I'm gonna have to do this for an episode because no, here we go. The combination of Johansson, Rossi, and Zuccarello in 83 minutes together had a 60% expected goals. So 60% of the time, if there's a goal scored on the ice, it's going to be by the Wild at that point. Now, just for kind of comparison's sake, let's look at where's the Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy line? They have a 59.8% expected goals percentage. Are averaging 3.61 goals per 60 minutes expected. So they're continuing to just rip the cover off the puck. I think at this point, the Wild need to just, like, we've seen the Lettieri and the Lucchini combos. I think the Wild need to pair somebody who's got some good offensive skill set with Marco Rossi. The grinders in Lettieri and Lucchini, like, they're good to win puck battles, and so that combination, can win some of those battles along the boards. But Lettieri and Lucchini are not they're not score first guys. They are like, we're going to be physical out there. And we're going to try to, win some battles. So they need to put somebody there with Rossi that has a little bit more of an offensive oriented. I thought that Zuccarello and Rossi, I thought that pairing had some good chemistry. And so maybe you go back to that. Maybe you try Ryan Hartman as that wing at that point. I don't know, because it seems to me, at least the way my head works, it just seems to me like there are a bunch of guys in that bottom six or even in the bottom three lines that there are good players mixed in there. I can't visualize the fit for how to make those players all work together, because we've got the Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and Boldy line. They're just wrecking people. I can't visualize it. So I'm having a hard time with that one, but we'll get it figured out. We will we'll get something figured out for that third and fourth line. But thankfully, having the maybe having the first line together, just doing their thing is a good spot to start. Denny, glad to hear you're feeling better. And we continue to hope that you've got a good stretch of days where you are feeling great coming up. Declan Chism really impressed me with his play. It is clear that he did not play many games, but I still think we were lucky with him. He plays great together with Brodin. Folks, we continue to reap the benefits from Winnipeg choosing size. Like, they had, I think it was Gustafsson for Winnipeg that was coming off of injured reserve, and the Jets had to put somebody on waivers. Logan Stanley was right there. Baby giraffe on skates. And Winnipeg said, no, we'll keep Logan Stanley. And Bill Guerin swoops in to snag Declan Chism for just the cost of adding his contract to the books. He's got a great offensive skill set. He's got a rocket wrist shot, and he hadn't played for 2.5 months at the time that the Wilds got him. So he's playing great, and I'm glad that he is getting a little bit of an elevated look with Jonas Brodin. Aiden, I'll answer this one for you. Thankfully, looks like Eriksson Ek is going to be okay. But I would think if Ek was hurt, that Rossi would get the bump back up, because he played with Kaprizov and Matt Boldy together. And that line, too, had some good chemistry. So I would think if that is how things go, that's how they would that's how they would go with it. Just scanning here. Feel like I missed something important, so I'm scanning back through the comments to see what I missed. Everyone wants to know, is next week doable for a elaborates, Denny, for because we're gonna do this again on Sunday, and we'll continue to do these live shows on Sundays throughout the rest of the season. But just give me a follow up on this one, so that I can make sure that I don't miss anything. If they jettison Johansson and Goudreau, insert the prospects, they can legitimately take a run like Florida did last year. I mean, look, we've seen it enough this year, folks. Young players play hard. They get the sense that their opportunity is earned, not given. And so, it could be that Kuznetsov comes in and he impresses to fill a spot. Danila Yurov is possible too. He's trending more, I think, towards staying in the KHL for another season, but it's like there is youth on the horizon that is going to be impressive as it gets here to fill out this roster. So, yeah. Oh, for the town hall. I see. Yeah, we could certainly do one on here. Just have everybody pop in the room and throw questions out. Yeah, I'll work on that. I'll see what I can get put together here for next Sunday. I'm doing good, Jay. Yeah, just long week. And I had a couple of games during the day yesterday with some technical issues, which are always something that everybody enjoys to deal with. And so that got frustrating, which is kind of the big thing that I was dealing with. But came home, had an opportunity to watch the Wild win. What more can you ask for? It's so difficult to make it to the final round without a few heartbreaking deep runs with the core team. It's funny too, because you think about the two years in which this Wild team has advanced the furthest in the postseason. The first one, when they got all the way to the Western Conference Final, that was just kind of lightning in a bottle. That team, if I remember correctly, if memory serves me, I was not what you would call a hockey enthusiast back then, but let's just pull it up here. That had to have been 04-05 then. No, obviously not. You moron, because that was a lockout season. 2002-2003. When the Wilds advanced all the way to the Western Conference Final against the Anaheim Ducks and ran into Jean-Sebastien Giguere, a name that I hate saying. I hate seeing it. That Wild team they finished the regular season at 42-29-1. And honestly, if you remember in that postseason, they fell behind Colorado 3-1 and then stormed back and beat Colorado twice in overtime in Game 6 and Game 7. Then they fell behind 3-1 to Vancouver, and they beat the brakes off of Vancouver in the final 3 games. 7-2, 5-1, 4-2. And then they scored 1 goal against Jaguar in the Western Conference final. It takes the elements all coming together. And the big thing in the postseason is just having guys that step up. You got to have guys that just like, I was talking to a friend about this a week or so ago. In the postseason, like, guys either have it or they don't. Like, it's something that you can learn through experience. So it's something that if you're like a rookie and you are a little, the lights are maybe a little too bright in your first postseason go arounds, there's certainly a possibility that you can then your next go around absolutely light it up. But it's something that just if a critical moment presents itself, you just have to deliver. And over these last couple of postseasons, in the St. Louis Blues series, it was Kirill Kaprizov. I'm going to do the thing myself. And then last year, it was Ryan Suter to Kaprizov's back. And he wasn't able to perform. And let's just be honest too about the Kaprizov front. I think he was probably rushed back after the Logan Stanley injury. I think he probably was rushed back, and so he wasn't able to perform at the level that we've seen him previously. But nobody else really stepped up to take the lead. And that's what you got to have for postseason successes. Somebody just has to say, I'm going to do the thing. Everybody get on my back. Kirby Puckett for the Minnesota Twins. Yeah. The 2 championships that we have in this state are because Kirby Puckett said, get on my back. And Jack Morris said, I'm not getting off the mound. Which you got to have in postseason play. I'm going to actually dive into this, Denny, in a future episode. I think there is enough here to actually spend a full episode talking about kind of where Marco Rossi is at right now. So I am not throwing this one under the bus because I think we're going to kind of wrap it up here for today. But I'm going to do a full episode on this week. Just looking at the usage and some things along those lines. We appreciate everybody tuning in from different spots throughout the country. Jay joining us from Atlanta, Tracy from LA, John from Atlanta, Dan out in North Carolina. Like we've got a good mix of fans throughout the country. And folks, you got people listening in like Kazakhstan on the podcast. Like that's one of the cool things is that I can look and see where people are listening from. It's all over. We got Norway in here right now. Appreciate every single one of you continuing to tune into this show and making it fun to do these live shows, because that I think is the thing that I've learned as I've become a host and gotten better at this, is audience input is a massive part of the massive piece of the puzzle. And so if you involve your audience and you make them feel like part of the show, the returns are immense. And so that's why we do these live shows, these town halls that we'll do next weekend. We've got a lot more on the way too, as we move through the rest of the season, a season in which, as there have been ups and downs, but there's been one thing Hastings represents. There's been one thing that I think has been the true constant throughout this season. Win or lose, Locked On Wild is going to pop in live after the game is done, and we'll react all throughout the week. So this is a toast to everybody out there for continuing to tune in, continuing to be an active participant. And there's more of that coming here as the week rolls on. But that's going to do it, I think, for today. Thanks for all the questions, everybody. I will go back through and watch this later today and jot down all of these questions, because I think there are some good ones even that I elaborated on that deserve full episodes too. Also, make sure if you've got an idea for an episode or a question you want answered, send it to lockedonwild@gmail.com, and we will get those questions into full episodes for you as well. Make sure to hit the like button before you head out for the day. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to enjoy the rest of your Sunday, as it's a nice day out there. And I think I'm going to make myself some pasta today. Nice big old bowl of pasta with full out sauce, with everything you can think of in there. Sounds like a good way to spend a Sunday. So appreciate everybody. Thanks for tuning in. We'll have our usual Monday episode coming up for you tomorrow. We'll check in with Alex about these big wins for your Minnesota Wild, and we'll get ourselves ready for what should be a frantic couple of months here to end the season. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for joining today's episode of Locked On Wild Live. And you can find more content by browsing our wide selection of videos, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network.